So, hey everybody, my name is Patrick. I'm part of the Exponential Next team, and this is Exponential Next Networks Next. And we're talking to leaders like my colleague and friend and brother in arms, Rodrigo Cano, about networks. And what we're talking about is how we move from isolated ministry to collaborative ministry. And so I couldn't think of anybody more that I wanted to talk to for this series than Rodrigo, who's doing a bunch of amazing things. So, Rodrigo, thanks for being here, brother. I appreciate you.
No, thank you so much for the invite. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
All
Thank
right.
you.
So, for folks who don't know you and kind of what you're up to, give us an overview of kind of the ministry responsibilities you're carrying right now.
Thank you. So like many people in ministry, I wear different hats. So I'll talk about the two main hats that I wear. One is with the local church, community Christian church. And so we've been planting churches all throughout the world, literally. And one of the ways that we do them is through microchurches.
Mm.
And so I'm in charge of the training, the equipping, the coaching, developing systems and processes that are going to help microchurch leaders and pastors be successful locally, regionally, and internationally. And so, by God's grace, in the last 5 years, we've started a little bit over 300 microchurches that are still part of Community Christian Church, and a little bit more that are not part of community, but through the relationships that we've had with them. So, plant a bunch of churches by God's grace. God is doing some amazing things there. And also, my other hat that I wear is with the Chicagoland Collective. So, Chicagoland Collective is something that we do here locally in the Chicagoland area. And we would say that our goal, we're committed to multiplying networks of disciple making churches until the love of God, of Jesus, reaches every community in the Chicagoland area. So, that's our goal, that's our commitment to start and develop networks for church planting in the Chicagoland area. And by God's grace, God is doing some amazing things there as well. So looking forward to this conversation.
So, you're not busy at all.
No, 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 not these at all. No, 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 no. Small things.
No, that is so awesome. And I want to double click on a couple of things, but what I want to start off with exploring with you is what about this idea of networks and collaboration? Like what clicked for you? When was it? Give me give us the story of that. When was it like, hey, this is something not only on the microchurch level I want to lean into, but starting these collaborative networks, as you said, in Chicago and in many other parts of the world. When was that? Tell us a little bit about it.
I mean, there was a very specific moment, Patrick. That was before COVID.
Hmm.
And we were talking about, at the time, I was pastoring a local church, one of the 7 locations of Community Christian Church,
Hmm.
specifically in Aurora, Illinois, which is the second largest city in Illinois. But compared to Chicago, it's small, but second largest city. And I felt we were doing some good work, engaging with the community. The community was coming to our church. And so we moved from one service to two services, and we have a lot of partners in the community that we were working with. However, I came across a statistic that of the 200,000 people who live within 5 mile radius of Aurora, about half of those people didn't have a home church.
Wow.
So you're talking about 100,000 people who didn't have no church affiliation, so they wouldn't profess themselves as Catholics or Muslim, like just no affiliation at all, 100,000 people. And so, I started to think, okay, great, like I can have 100 services on Sunday or something like that.
You
And
could
it
do
was
more.
still,
You could just keep doing more.
yeah, yeah, exactly. We can do more, right? And invite people, everybody come to my thing. And instead of doing that, like I started thinking, why two things. Why one is how do we empower people to live on mission?
Good.
So how do we empower people to really do it outside of the four walls of the church? But the second thing is like, would it be cool if we do it with other churches? Like if other churches are joining together and we, in a sense, own the lostness of the city together. Like, what would it look like? What kind of impact can we make on that? And so I was exposed to the idea of networks through, the work that at the time New Thing was doing. Now New Thing's part of Exponential, but and the idea of networks, and I was like, that's the answer. Like working together with other pastors, working together with other churches is the way that we can accomplish this. And so it was like the light bulb just went off. And for me, started getting connected with what was already happening here in the Chicagoland area, just to kind of like learn. And I would say like for me, it started a process of who do I connect with?
Mm.
How do I connect with them? Like, what do we do when we connect, when we gather together? So a lot of different things that started to just trying to resolve in my mind. How do we do this, and how do we do this well? Yeah.
Interesting, interesting. So, okay, there's so many questions I need to ask you, but I'm going to try to stay on point. Um, for you, when you're casting vision to leaders in Chicagoland about a network, what are you telling them? Give me the script, give me the play that you're trying to run with them. I find that fascinating.
The first thing that I always talk about is just the opportunity that is out here. I mean, when you talk about Chicagoland, now let's move from Aurora to Chicagoland. I mean, you're literally talking about millions of people who don't have a relationship with Jesus, right? And so, once again, you can talk about having a lot of services or bringing people in, but just the opportunity, the lostness of the city, and the potential that the city has,
Right.
and I'm passionate about cities. I love Chicago and what happens in Chicago. And so like the cities have a capacity to shape what happens. A city like Chicago, third largest city in the nation, like if something can happen in Chicago, like it can happen anywhere. So it's always like the opportunity. So one thing is the opportunity, but then I talk about, and um, probably some people have heard about this. So we talk about the Great Commission,
Mm.
we talk about what God has called us to do. Then we talk about the Great Commandment, and we talk about like loving God, loving people. But then we talk about what we call, and I mean, you are familiar with this, like the Great Collaboration, the John 17 prayer. And so we this is the way that we talk about it. Like if we really want to make an impact in the city, yes, we have to follow the Great Commission of going making disciples. We have to love God, have to love other people, but we have to do it together.
Mm.
Like there's no way that one particular church, even one particular network, because we talk about networks, a collective of networks. That's the way that we're going to be able to make an impact in our cities when we work together. And so that's kind of like the way that I bring it up. I would say,
You're appealing
and
to you're appealing to a larger kingdom call. If
yes,
is that a
yes,
fair
yes.
read of what you're doing?
Yes, yes, yes. So it's not about building my castle, it's
That's good.
about building the kingdom of God. And so we talk
Beautiful.
about it that way. And I will tell you a couple of things. After COVID, the level of receptiveness around
Mm.
collaborating has really increased. So a lot of people want to do that. But if anybody who's listening to this, you've heard Chicago, it's all constantly in the news
Mm.
for a lot of different reasons. And some of those reasons are real, some of those reasons are not real. Like Chicago is a beautiful city, has a lot of great people, but there's some challenges in the city. And so lately, because of what we've seen and experienced, like if the level of collaboration was increasing, like now it's almost like a doubling on that, to come together as one church, the Church of Chicagoland, to
Wow.
collaborate and come together and to really bring the gospel and the hope that comes with knowing Jesus, around the city. And so it comes with a lot of beautiful things. One is the diversity of the city. And so we talk about Spanish speaking, bilingual, English speaking. We talk about like the diversity of the body of Christ. So we talk about like women led, minority led, majority led.
Mm.
We talk about the diversity of the expression. So we talk about macro, mega, micro. So just the beauty of the city represented in the networks. And for me, that's key. If that's not happening, we're doing something wrong. So have to look at what's happening in the city and embrace that, and all of that to say that the level of collaboration, the level of participation of churches saying like, yes, we want to be part of something like that, tell us more, has really increased. And so we have this amazing opportunity to engage with them.
Wow, man. I love you. I love your catalytic vision, brother. That's why I wanted to talk to you. So there's a misunderstanding about networks that
Mm.
I'm trying to address. And so, very true, many of us in ministry and church leadership and church planning are already involved in networks. But talk to me about the kind of networks we're talking about.
Yeah.
What do you see, and what do you see personally as their value? You gave some of the kingdom opportunities, and I love that. But what about for the personal, like the opportunity that a pastor has to be a part of a network? Because I think that kind of gets lost sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of opportunities, but one is it's a kingdom opportunity. And I'll, or I know I already talked about that, but it's just a kingdom opportunity. Like gives you an opportunity to think beyond the four walls of your church.
Good.
And so kingdom opportunity, also it's just an opportunity to connect with other people. So we talk about like values that we have, right? And so we have relationships as a value, and we say that we're friends on mission. And so like just the opportunity to connect with other people that are thinking and dreaming about the same thing. We talk about resources and how we can share resources when it comes to, best practices and even sometimes finances, but even like a bigger vision. I know, Exponential, it's really good at doing this, talking about the 16%. And what does that mean? And so it gives us an opportunity, like at the personal level, to tell my congregation, hey, we're part of something bigger. And my congregation, average size in the United States, I think is now 70. I think it's just gone down. But to tell my 70 people, hey, and we're planting churches together. And we're not doing it by ourselves, but we're doing it with other people in Chicago because we love Chicago. So this opportunity of sharing resources, thinking about reproducing, because once again, I'm thinking about like we have mega churches to think about, but I'm thinking about the 70, 70 people pastor is was telling their congregation, hey, by the way, like we're reproducing disciples, we're reproducing leaders, we're reproducing churches, we're part of different networks, we're reproducing like just to bring that to the conversation. And then, obviously like the residency, like, and plus we're investing in the next generation of church planters. And so I think at a personal level, like if I'm leading a church, regardless of the size, but I'm thinking about the average size who is invested in this, like gives me an opportunity to dream big,
Yeah.
and gives me an opportunity to be part of something that is bigger than myself, and really be committed to the Great Commission, really be committed to the kingdom of God, without having to figure out everything on our own, on ourselves. So I think that's a beautiful opportunity at the personal level.
So, okay, there's so much again you're bringing up that I need to I want to ask you about. But you bring obviously a very, you bring a perspective from the Latino community, and
Yeah,
collaboration is one of the things that I'm wrestling with, and that we're exploring in this podcast series, and some of the other work that we're doing with Exponential Next is collaboration is so culturally informed.
yeah,
So as a Latino pastor in the city of Chicago, given, the environment we're in, kind of at the macro level and then at the micro level, how do you talk about collaboration and networks in your community, if you will, in your cultural context?
yeah. I mean, if it's okay, Patrick, let me just share a little bit of the context, and so
Please,
that people know.
please.
And so I would say, that after COVID, um, I think a lot of churches, but specifically the Hispanic church, we were asking the question, how do we bring people back? Like, how do we make so that people show up to our thing one more time? Because like many churches, we were struggling, we were not knowing what to do. But then something happened, and just a little bit of background. It was 2022, 2023, with a lot of people were coming from the southern border, and they were coming like they were literally being bused to our city, to Chicago and the Chicagoland area. And so we've been praying, we were praying for a revival, and God sent us people, and we didn't expect that God would send it this way. And so we were having a lot of people. And
Good.
so I think the question that we were asking then, and a lot of leaders were asking, is like, what do we do with so many people? And so by God's grace, uh, churches started to grow. A lot of like micro church expressions started to come to be. Churches were reproducing services, so 2 or 3 services during the day. Like it was pretty cool what was happening. But then, like last year specifically, we had a really tough season where there's a lot of just presence of eyes specifically, and so a lot of fear, even people with the right paperwork, like afraid of going out. Just a very contextual reality that Chicago experienced. And I want to be respectful because I know there's people in a lot of sides of the conversation of the immigration. So I want to be respectful with that. I'm just saying it was a reality in Chicago that Hispanic churches were experiencing, whether that was right or wrong. Like it was a reality, and we were trying to figure out what to do. But I think, and so the question, so question one was, how do we bring people? Second question was then like, what do we do with so many people? The third question that we were asking is, how do we respond to this reality? How do we respond to the crisis that is happening right now? Now, the crisis has settled a little bit, settled down. But I think the question that we're asking right now is like, okay, how do we empower people to live on mission? Whether they're here, whether they're sent back, whether they live wherever whether they move, like how do we actually disciple people so that people can live on mission? And I think that's the question that we're trying to answer in the Latino church.
Hmm.
So two answers to that. One, we need to increase the prophetic voice.
Hmm.
Like in the Latino community, we're asking where are the people with the prophetic voice that are calling us back to Jesus, not that calling out the things that are wrong to bring us back to Jesus. So, like, how do we still have hope in the midst of everything that is going? And it's only through the prophetic voice that is calling us back to
Good.
Jesus. So
Really good.
that's one.
Yeah.
But then the other thing is like doubling down on what I said is how do we actually train people to live on mission? And how do we send people out? And how do we empower people? So people in the Hispanic church, a lot of churches experience a decline in attendance. So some churches even more than 50% decline in attendance. And so the pastor have to be creative. How do we still disciple people when they're not coming to our church? And how do we equip people? And so it shifted from, once again, come and see my thing to, no, let me empower you. So I'm going to give you resources. I'm going to give you best practices. I'm going to give you discipleship tools, discovery Bible study. I'm going to give you the manuscript of my preaching, and I'm going to let you tear it apart and do your own thing. And then I'm going to make sure that I visit you, and I'm going to make sure that we empower you, and want to make sure that we're discipling you to be who God called you to be. And so that's kind of like where we are in that process. And we're seeing a lot of traction in that. People responding, Hispanic pastors responding, leaders responding to say like, okay, tell us more. How do we actually do that in practicality? And so it's been really good to see what God is doing in that regard.
That is awesome. Talk to me about and this is just me as observing networks and kind of listening and learning from pastors and leaders like you. Western culture very much is individualistic, and we go into this a little bit in other parts of the podcast where the scorecard is really, as you said, a castle scorecard still. Like, how do I get
Yeah.
people in? How do I get it? Um, you're you're very eloquently discussing a kingdom opportunity, and I love how you just say, "Hey, people started showing up in our city, and we needed to figure out what does it look like to be on mission." But how do you keep it about mission? Because obviously there's great works in Jesus' name, and we're all for that, and justice, and all those things that are truly important. But at the end of the day, knowing what I know about you and your ministry and your heart, you're about raising up disciples and helping leaders and starting microchurches and starting new churches. How do you talk about that in your community? How do you keep it about the mission and not just allow it to kind of veer off to social issues that are very important and
Yeah.
critical and cannot be easily just dismissed? I hope you understand my point of
Yeah,
questioning.
yeah, yeah.
But how do you keep it about the mission as you are doing all this other stuff?
There's been a couple of things that have been super helpful to me. I mean, there's a graphic, and maybe we can somehow share it with people that City to City has come that they develop, which I think is really interesting. And so they talk about the three layers of gospel saturation in any
Hmm,
city.
hmm,
And so at the center of it, they talk about like a contextualized vision for the gospel. And so what that means is that doing ministry in Chicago looks different than doing ministry in Miami, or
Mm,
doing ministry in Chicago looks different than doing ministry in Phoenix, Arizona, right? And
mm,
so what does the gospel, without diluting the gospel, how does the gospel look like in the city of Chicago? And so we have to wrestle with that at the local level, right? So the realities of Chicago, the challenges of reality of Chicago, all of that. But then the second layer that they talk about, which is really interesting, they talk about church renewal and church planting networks. And so they talk about like once you have the contextualized vision, in order for this to actually live out in your neighborhoods, you have to really focus on church planting and church renewal networks. And then the third layer that they talk about is all everything that you mentioned, like social justice, theology training, marriage counseling, budgeting, all of those different things that are really necessary in order to develop the ecosystem. But what I love about this graphic is that they all communicate with one another.
mm.
So there's a clear communication with one another. What I love about it is that usually in what I've seen historically is that they put church planting networks as one of the many things outside of the orbit. And what I love about this is that they put it closer to the center. And I agree with that wholeheartedly because the only way that we're going to be able to see the beauty of the gospel lived out in our cities is that we really develop networks of church planting and church renewal. We need to focus on that. And so when we come to the table and we meet with pastors and with leaders, we talk about the different needs that are out there. And so we say we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's already organizations and there's already a lot of good work that is happening around those needs. So let's collaborate with them. But also, let's not forget that the best resource that we have for human flourishing is the gospel.
Great.
And the
Mm,
gospel only happens through the church.
mm,
The gospel only happens through, church planting and only happens through really like the best, we said this, the best way to evangelize is through church planting. And so new churches do that really well. And so let's not lose focus on what really matters here. All of these things are really important, and we collaborate with a lot of different organizations, but we try to keep the main thing the main thing.
yeah.
And at the end of the day, without trying to oversimplify, the Great Commission, right? Like go and make disciples. Like that's what I'm calling the church to do is to go and make disciples.
Yeah.
And even, in the book of Acts, Jesus, are you going to restore the kingdom? Like, look at everything that is wrong. Like, are you going to do it now? And Jesus is like, I don't think it's up to you to know when you're going to do it. However, you're going to receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, and you'll be my witnesses. And talks about, the focus of the church is to do that. Yeah.
So good. So let's kind of just take a pivot here and get a little tactical about networks, network leadership, starting networks. Um, what I love to ask when I have an opportunity to speak to leaders like yourself is, what do you see as the barriers to networks, i.e., collaboration? Give me a couple that you've just noted in your
Mhm.
experience and in your leadership, and then how do you address some of those barriers?
Yeah. I think overall, so we talk about three all the time, and I briefly want to mention those three. So one is ego, right?
Mm,
So like my church is
the
better
big
than
one, the
yours, or
big one.
like I have a lot of programs and a lot of different things that I'm busy, and so like ego is number one.
Mm,
The other one, we call it economy. Like what
mm,
what is it going to take? And we talk about not just economy in the financial aspect, but also like my time, like just overall economy. And then we talk about ecclesiology.
yeah,
In my experience of those three, ecclesiology seems to be like the biggest barrier.
really.
Yeah. And so uh, the sense of like we do things this way,
Mm,
and we know the in the West, in the Western world, like the church is usually busy with programs, and so it's very programmatic. I would say it's problematic too, but it's problematic
That's good.
in the sense that pastors are so busy with their own ecclesiology, their own way of doing church, that it's really hard for them to think anything beyond that.
Yeah.
And so helping them see beyond that, I think that's been like the I think it's probably the strongest barrier to overcome.
Yeah.
And so we talk about vision, vision kingdom, I'm sorry, kingdom vision. We talk about like, citywide vision, all of these things. But sometimes pastors are so busy with their own thing. Sunday comes around every 7 days, so that for them to overcome that, it takes a long time. I would say that, it takes a long time to overcome that. And so something that we've done and we see working is that we come alongside pastors and in a way say like, your castle, it's important. We don't want to completely dismiss your castle. It's important that your castle is healthy. Your people are coming to Christ. You're baptizing people. Like you have enough to sustain your castle financially. So we don't want to dismiss that. So how can we support like what are some of the needs of your castle? At
Mm,
the end of the day, it always comes back to discipleship.
yeah.
So it's really easy. Yeah, let's talk about discipleship. But then once we address some of those things, it's like, okay, let's think about beyond your castle.
Yeah.
Like, let's think about the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
And so, in my experience, that's been probably the toughest thing. I've seen it in all kinds of arenas, different arenas. So, from mega churches to micro churches to minority led churches, all kinds of churches, it's overcoming the ecclesiology obstacle.
Wow. Okay. Let's give us a sense of what's going on in Chicago. You're leading the Chicagoland Collective.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, give us a sense of what's going on in there right now, and what's giving you the most energy about it at the moment.
Yeah. So thankfully, I mean, thankful for what Exponential does. I think it's given us what's happening here is that we're coming around the 16% mission. So
Mm,
we have embraced that as our own vision.
mm,
And we don't talk about it like, oh, that's Exponential thing. We're saying, no, Chicagoland, this is our thing. If we really want to see movement and momentum happening in Chicago, that means that we need to get to 140 networks in the Chicagoland area. And so we're
oh
thinking
boy.
about 140 networks by 2035. So how do we get there? Like the question that we're asking is, how do we
And
get
can I
there?
stop you right there, brother, just very quickly, because I think it's important. How do you just maybe not have done this? How do you define a network? Just real quick, so everybody
Yeah.
knows.
So the network we say is 3 to 6 churches working together to plant more churches. So
Okay.
as simple as that. So we're friends on mission. We're churches who are friends on mission to plant more churches. So that's the simple definition of it. And so we would call ourselves a collective because we have 16 networks that we're working with. It represents about 80 churches working together to plant more churches. And then we're in the developing stage. We have about 7 more networks that are in the development stage, meaning they're taking steps towards becoming a network. So they're having conversations with other churches, they're taking steps, they're building the rhythms around that. And so we believe we're confident that by the end of the year, we'll have about 23, 24 networks.
So,
So God is doing some amazing things. Uh, but our goal, big goal, is 140 networks by 2035. And so what we feel God is calling us in the short term. So I'll talk about short-term goals is to really invest in the health of the network leader. So we're investing a lot of time and a lot of resources in their health, like being healthy network leaders. So that includes some coaching, one-on-ones, regular meetings, regular gatherings, things that are going to build. And even when we have the gatherings, bring in some expert on some type of topic that is going to help us become healthy and healthier leaders. So that's the short-term goal. So we're investing in that. And then midterm goal, we're talking about a couple of things. The potential capacity.
hmm,
So the potential capacity, we're talking about residencies. Like if we really want to see a movement of things happening in Chicago, like we cannot wait for people to move to Chicago and start something. Like we need to raise them up from within. And so that's what we call it the future capacity. Then we're talking about current momentum. What is God doing right now that we can put some more fuel to the fire? The current momentum that we're seeing is in minority-led churches, microchurches, Hispanic churches. Like God
Mm.
is doing something amazing in those three categories. So we want to invest in a lot of our effort and time in that. And then what we're calling legacy capacity. So a lot of church renewal, and I think this is something new for us in the term of coming alongside churches who already have the history, they have the influence, they have, the recognition in the city, they have the long-standing, history of investing in the city, but maybe they're struggling with how to reproduce disciples or how to reproduce leaders. So we come alongside of them, uh, thinking about the legacy that they can leave, whether they're church renewal or maybe they're, in their walk they decide that the best thing to moving forward is leaving their property to somebody else or giving financially to something. So there's many ways that we can engage on that. So that's like midterm goals. And then obviously, like the long-term goal is 2035, we have 140 networks. So that's kind of like what's happening in the Chicagoland area. And so we talk about, once again, like microchurch networks, Spanish-speaking, bilingual, women-led networks, all kinds of different networks, prevailing model church networks, all kinds of different networks that will help us get to the 140 by 2035.
Love it. And you're dealing with a wide diversity of churches. And you've mentioned the kingdom calling and the kingdom cause, but what do you see them leaning into besides that? Like why do churches join networks in Chicagoland? What are you seeing or what are you hearing from some of these leaders? Because yeah, it's great. We're going to change the spiritual landscape of Chicago. I'm all in. But at the end of the day, like you so well said, at the end, a lot of these leaders, our friends, are running stuff. They're running churches. They're leading
Yeah.
teams. They're leading staffing. So what are you seeing there?
I'm trying to not oversimplify, but it's gonna sound very simple. It's friendships, it's
Yeah.
relationships.
Wow.
I mean, if you would have to
Huh.
define it somehow, that's what's making it happen. So it's just using the friendship, the relationships, building new friendships, getting to know what's already happening in the city, coming alongside of people. But at the end of the day, it like we're friends on mission. Like that's our rallying call. Like we're just gonna come alongside one another and see what God is doing, what God is prompting us to do together. So I know it sounds simple, but I mean that's the secret sauce, if you want to call it. Like we are friends on mission, and we deeply care for one another. So it's not a transactional unit. It's not a transaction. I mean, yes, like you said, it's great. We talk about kingdom impact and God is doing some amazing things. But at the end of the day, like we care for one another. Like we care what's happening in little village, we care what's happening, in the city. We care what's happening in Chicagoland, in the suburbs. Like we care for one another.
Mm.
And I think that's what makes Chicagoland actually, you want to call it attractive, but makes people want to be part of something is because they see that we care for one another. And I think it just brings me back like to the John 17 the John 17 prayer of Jesus. Like Jesus says, Father, like the glory that you've given me. It's always, to me, it's so shocking. The glory that you've given me, I'm giving it to them. Like just hard stuff there. Like what? Like the glory of Jesus given to the church so that we can be one.
Yeah.
And so that's the way that the world is going to know that you sent me. Like that's what Jesus is saying. And so we try to like really live that out, like to really experience it together. And I would say that's the thing that makes it unique or relatable. Yeah.
So you're really, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think it's such a valuable point you're making. You're really taking the idea of friendship and mission, and you're helping cultivate that. You're bringing those elements together. How do you do that? Like maybe it's talk to me about the rhythms. Like you don't make friends just by, hey, how you doing? Like
Yeah, yeah,
what are the rhythms that you're cultivating to build this platform where these friendships can flourish?
yeah. I'm gonna go back a little bit to when I was still the pastor of the local church, because I think sometimes what the excuse or the reason why is because we're busy, right? We're busy, we're doing a lot of different things. And so in my mind, I always thought, what if I invest, like for lack of a better word, what if I tithe 10% of my time in thinking about multiplication? So
Mm,
my 40 hours a week, what if I just spend 4 hours a week thinking about multiplication?
good.
And that was kind of like my mentality. And so for me, when I was starting the network, because I started a network here in Aurora, I started to just open my eyes. I walking through the city, running through the city. I like to run. So, like, where are the churches? Where are the churches located? Like, what's the name of the pastor? Do I know the pastor? Do I not know the pastor? And I started like literally just showing some churches just showing up and introducing myself. It's like, hey, my name is Rodrigo. I'm a pastor here in Aurora. I would love to get coffee with you.
Oh, wow.
And so like that's kind of like how I started the network. Another thing that I did is just call, I was in finance before cold calling, call Facebooking people and so DMing people like, hey, I saw that, you're starting a church here. Like I'm a pastor. I'm excited that you're starting a church in the city. How can I help you? How can I connect with you? How can I pray for you? And out of that, started to invest a lot of one-on-one time with people. And then I started to kind of like cast the idea of like, hey, do you know that there's more people who think like you? And there are more people who are, have the same passion as you. Like, wouldn't you like to get to know them? Why don't we meet together over lunch and we just talk about what God is doing in Aurora? And so that's kind of like how I started the investment of putting out my time and effort into doing that. And so like practically speaking, before, when I was still a pastor, like I'm just gonna invest 4 hours of my week and thinking about multiplication. And so now that we have, more constant rhythms, so the rhythms that I have is once a month we meet as a network. And when we meet as a network, we talk about, relational, just how are you doing? And we talk about that. And then we talk about like, is there anything that God is prompting us to do together? In relates to church planting. And we
Wow.
talk about it, and if
You're
God is
thinking about
showing
church
something,
planting, right?
yes,
That's
yes,
a specific question you are asking every network to ask itself every month.
yes,
Okay.
around church planting,
Interesting.
specifically around church planting. If there's other things that we need to do, then we'll address those things, but it's always about church planting. And so that's once a month.
Hmm.
And then I have one-on-ones with the people who are part of the network. I would say regularly. I don't have like specific like rhythm, but maybe every 2 months, every time, once a quarter, like I will meet with them one-on-one. And then as a collective, we have 3 gatherings a year where
Hmm.
we're inviting everybody to be part of those
This
gatherings.
is where all the churches in the network, sorry, in the
Yeah,
networks come together as the collective. Okay.
yeah, yeah. And so we bring everybody together and we usually invite somebody who's going to speak to us, is going to give us some vision casting, some call to action. And so those are kind of like the rhythms that we have. So one-on-ones regularly, for sure once a month as a network, and then we talk about how we're doing and then what projects we're working on as to plant more churches, and then three citywide gatherings that we're part of, and then there's some off things that we do, but there are more like because we're friends, right, and we want to be together, so we just hey, we're gonna get pizza, and so whoever wants to show up, and whoever shows up is part of that conversation. So
Like you said, it's simple, but it's intentional in building
yes, yes,
relationships.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yes.
It doesn't have to be, an agenda. It doesn't have to be anything other. That's good.
Yeah.
Couple more questions, because I want to respect your time. Pretend I'm someone who's going to start a network. What are you looking for? Who is a network leader? How do you kind of define a network leader? Yeah, I'm curious on your take on that, because so many that potentially are listening to this podcast or leaning into this conversation, we want to see lead networks. We
Yeah.
want to see everyone at least be a part of a network. But there's a certain group of people that are going to lead these networks. What are you looking for in Chicagoland Collective, and how do you kind of call that out in leaders?
Ideally, Patrick, they're part of a network.
Okay.
Like, like once again, because we believe that this idea of apprenticeship, this
Yeah,
idea of looking within what's already happening.
good.
And so ideally, you're already part of a network. And so, and in the network, like you've shown that you're able to invite people, to convene people. Like we've seen multiplication happening at the local level. So you're part of a church and you're multiplying disciples, you're multiplying leaders. Maybe you've planted a church before. So like there's some things that are very practical that are happening already within your context. And so we want to call that out. And the way that we call that out is, once again, it's very simple. And I see you conversation. Hey, like we see that you have multiplied. We see the people follow you. We see that you're relational. We see that you're growing in your relationship with Christ. We see that, you're relationally intelligent. Like these are like the things that we're looking in an apprentice. And so, hey, we would like to invite you to this apprenticeship on starting a new network. And we're going to train you. I mean, you have experienced the rhythms and all of that. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to call some friends and some people to start this network with you. So it's very, once again, it's very relational, but it's identifying the gifts and people because you've seen it happen, and then just calling it out with a simple "I seen you" conversation, and then just giving them a framework of how the actually networks work. So I know it sounds simplistic, but it works, and I think that's the beauty of it. Like it's so simple that it works. Now, if somebody comes to us and like, hey, I want to start a network, and I think my call to action is like join a network first. Like be part of a network for a season. And for some people, it'll be a short season. Maybe it's 2 or 3 months, and they're like, oh yeah, this guy has the capacity or this girl has the capacity to do it. Don't let's catalyze them to start their own network. But sometimes in our effort to build more networks, like we jump some some steps. And we've seen it at every level, right? You put somebody to do something when you have like once again, and it's a simple process. We're not saying like you have to be in a network for 3 years and then you have to go to seminary and get your, like, we're not saying that. It's a simple, just like really show us that you're all about the mission.
Yeah,
Show us that you're all about, the kingdom of God and not your own castle.
yeah.
And that happens like super fast. Yeah.
Well, and I love that you said like it's multiplication is then potentially built into the network as through apprenticeship, right? So you're apprenticing from within. And you and I have had this conversation in the past, but so much of what we've learned about networks, we learned in small group ministry,
Yep.
a lot of the same dynamics. So I love that you're calling that out a little bit. Like perfectly fine for somebody to show up and say, "Yeah, God's calling me to start a network in my city or my county or whatever." But I love how you're calling us to apprentice leaders
Yeah.
and bring them up from within. Um, last question then. If there are listeners who are living or working or doing ministry within Chicagoland, how do they get in touch with you and the Chicagoland Collective?
Yeah. I mean, the easiest one is just email me. So Rodrigo Cano, right now it's Rodrigo Cano at newthing.org. It's going to change, but Rodrigo Cano at newthing.org. And we will be in touch with them. And so we will love to get connected with anybody and everybody who's thinking about networking in the Chicagoland area. The other thing is we have these three gatherings in the year. So I don't know when this podcast is going to come out, but we have one coming up on February 27th. And so we invite to these gatherings. We have three a year, and you're invited. So a lot of these gatherings are more like people who are interested or trying to figure out like if that's something that I want to be part of. Obviously, we invite all our networks and they're there, but so we have a different ways to connect, and we are rebranding our name. So we're calling ourselves the Chicagoland Collective. Pretty soon, we're gonna have our network, our website up and running. So once we have that, we can share that with you. But we're working on a lot of those details. But I would say easiest way is just email me, Rodrigo Cano at newthing.org, and we'll be in touch with you.
Sounds great. And we're going to make sure that these links and the website get in the podcast as people are taking a look at this. So, Man, that is great. Thanks for sharing your story, your wisdom, Rodrigo. I appreciate you, and particularly for the work that you're doing cross-culturally. I know it's not always easy for you, and I admire you, I respect you, I appreciate the way that you find the focus on the kingdom, no matter what. You're just relentless about that, and so I know that God's going to continue to use you for that.
Thank you.
So
Appreciate it.
appreciate you spending some time with us, and I'm looking forward to seeing what God does next.
Thank you. See you
All right.
soon.
Thank you.